Good morning. Today is March 31st, and it would be an A day if we were still in school. So for today's video, I want to talk about paired passages and how do you tackle them. So what is a paired passage? In very simple terms, it's anytime you are given two pieces to read and then a task wherein you have to analyze both and then find a way to develop a common theme between them and write about it. So you see this a lot in standardized testing. You see it a lot in Regents testing here in New York. So that's one reason. But more importantly, on a higher level, being able to read multiple passages and to talk about them is a higher level critical thinking skill. And aside from the whole testing piece, just because of that, it's a valuable skill to develop. You want to, as young adults, as learners, as educated citizens, you want to be able to read different articles, different pieces of literature, and analyze them in relation to each other. So that's why this is such an important skill to develop. But it is kind of a hard skill to develop at first. A lot of times when we read, especially at younger ages, we read a single piece just for the sole purpose of reading it. And as I mentioned in an earlier video talking about independent reading, a lot of times we avoid reading at first because we're afraid that we're not very skilled at it or that it is difficult. So if you add a task wherein you have to read two pieces that might on the surface be unrelated, it becomes an even more challenging or daunting task. So hopefully we can break that down in this video and talk about how to attack a paired passage type task and a way to approach it in such a way that it'll make it easier for you. All right, so first step, of course, and this is the most important, you have to read both passages, obviously, but you have to read them very carefully. Right? You can't just skim through it and hope that you can, at the end, write something about it or discuss it in a way that's going to sound both thoughtful and well-informed. All right, that's not going to work. You have to read them carefully. And that means thinking carefully about what you're reading. It means being focused. And again, I say this all the time to my students. We have to be aware, we have to be cognizant of what we're like when we read. We have to be aware of distractions. And if you are someone who tends to think that you can, plug in earphones and listen to music while reading, chances are that really is distracting you. And you have to be aware of that. I highly suggest that when you start off doing tasks like this that involve reading and doing a task that you're not familiar with, you try to avoid listening to music when attempting these tasks. You really want to be focused on what it is you're attempting to do, and in this case, reading something carefully. So read through it carefully. Now, when you are reading something like this and you are attempting to read it thoroughly and carefully, the next thing you want to do is to take notes on it. Now, what does that mean? How do you take notes? This is something that I think can be the most frustrating thing that ever happens in school and education, right? Because you hear it all the time. Take notes, take notes, take notes, right? Teacher tells you to read a chapter in, say, a science book. Make sure you take notes on it. Right? But they don't tell you what those notes should look like. They don't tell you how to take notes. They just tell you, take notes. And, I can't obviously right now go into all the various ways to do that. But what I will say is one strategy that can be very useful for taking notes that I think applies across the board is to try to read a block of text, a paragraph or a subheading if it's like a science or history text. And after reading that paragraph, summarize it in a sentence. All right. Now, that sounds simple at first, but it's actually pretty difficult when you get down to it. Try to read a paragraph, and at the end of the paragraph, stop, think, and go, okay, how can I put everything I just read in that paragraph into one sentence? In the act of trying to condense all of that into just a few words, forces you to think very deeply about what it is you read. And that process actually greatly increases your chance of remembering it. So that's why it's such a useful way to do it. So that's a good strategy to use. And now, as you get more skilled with that, like if it was a novel that you were reading or a larger book, you can do that every page. Try to summarize the page in one sentence. And then maybe, again, as you develop this skill and become more comfortable with it, every chapter. All right, so that's a great skill to use. Write it down, make it into one sentence after every paragraph. So you've gone through the whole article, you've gone through the whole chapter, you've done your little summaries. Now the next step, what's the main idea? Look at your notes, think back on what you read, and figure out the main idea for each thing you've read. All right, that's key for both pieces. You've done the process, you've read them carefully, you've limited distractions while reading them carefully, so you don't have, like I have, cats over there, or Legos here, or video games near you. You've focused on your reading, you've read both carefully, you've taken your notes, figure out the main idea thinking about those notes. All right? Once you have that main idea for both passages, then you want to compare them. Are they talking about the same thing? Right? If they're on the same topic, great, because that makes it easier. If they're on the same topic, are they saying the same thing? Because that's an important thing to consider, right? If they are saying the same thing, are they saying it in the same way, right? Do they come to the same conclusion by the same means? So sometimes, right, an article will make a point and another article will make the same point, but the way they get to that point is different, right? And you have to think about why. And that's a great question. Why did they get to the same point through different means? And that gives you something to think about and discuss in your paper that you are writing. So that's a good step, right? So follow that procedure. Now, are they talking about something different? Maybe they're on the same topic, but they have very different views on that topic, right? So they're very contrasting in that regard. Again, why? Why are they on one topic having such polar opposites or diverging opinions? Look at the ways each article reached its conclusion and discuss how and why they got to there, right? So if you break down paired passages in this way, it'll make it easier for you to discuss it. Okay? Now, let's say you have to structure all of that into an essay format, right? Split your body paragraphs into that. An easy, and this is going to be a very simplified way, I typically nowadays focus on middle school level teaching. I would set it up so that maybe you have 3 body paragraphs. First body paragraph, one article, second body paragraph, the next article, third body paragraph, talking about both in relation to each other, right? Very simplified structure to set that up, right? But go about explaining that. That should make the process a lot easier for you. When I mentioned the whole note-taking process, one of the things you want to be able to do in regards to that is to be able to write it on the actual piece of whatever you're reading. Now, I get it. If you're given a novel or a textbook from a class, especially in the lower levels before you get to college, you really can't write on them without getting in trouble. And as a teacher, I can't tell you to go start writing on your textbooks, even though I really, really want to, because it's one of the best strategies you can get. And if for some odd reason you are a college student or someone who, after all of this craziness going on with COVID-19 ends, you are looking to go on to college starting in August, if I can give you one tip, it's this: write in your textbooks. Don't worry about selling the things back at the end of the semester, because you're going to get 50 cents for the $458 book that you bought anyway. Write in the thing, all right? It's a great way to help you remember. All of that summarizing strategy I mentioned, if you write it right on the article or the text you're reading as you do it, it'll greatly increase your chances of remembering it. Obviously, when you're in the primary, middle, and high school level, you can't do that without getting some sort of punishment. So there are ways to do that. And a great way to do that would be sticky note, or, I guess the brand name would be Post-it, but I don't want to endorse anything. Have these with you, right? They're not just great for doodling. They're not just great for making flip books or whatever else it is, or tiny paper airplanes that you try to throw up into the ceiling tiles in your classroom when the teacher's not looking. Write your summary, stick it on the page or the paragraph, and then move on to the next one. It's a great strategy. If it is something that has been printed out to you, which amongst all the random papers I have around me, I don't have anything printed out I could use as an example quickly, write on that actual printout. circle the paragraph, draw an arrow, write it in the margin, however you can figure it out. It's a wonderful strategy for you to use for this. And I think that's it for this video. All right. I hope everyone's doing well. As we've been in, now this is the third week, things have, started to finally progress into everyone feeling, I think, a little bit more comfortable in distance learning. We've all started to show the signs of having to do social distancing and quarantine. I am wearing this to hide the fact that my hair is looking pretty strange. I'm starting to look like, was it Hagrid from Harry Potter? So that's getting pretty scary. So I apologize for that. Hopefully everyone's doing well. I had several students reach out to me, which is great. I think the best request I've received is for a drawing of a raptor. So I don't want to mention names because I don't know if that's appropriate, but to that student, I will draw you a raptor. I will try to draw it tonight, and I will, either scan it or something and include it in the next video. So there's something to look forward to, a raptor drawing. Hopefully I don't think I've drawn dinosaurs really that much in a long time, but we'll see how that goes. So until next time, I hope everyone's doing well. And, if you need to, ask me a question. If you have any questions that are, need to be asked right away, you can always email me. I'll put the email in the description so that if you're not one of my students, you can just use that. You can leave a comment if you need me to cover something in a future video. Next week with my students through the distance learning platform, I believe we're going to start poetry because I think that would be, April is, traditionally when people like to talk about poetry with National Poetry Month, but I also think it would work very well on this type of platform and give us a lot of options. So next week, I'll be doing a lot of videos on poetic devices and so forth. So there's something to look forward to or be afraid of. I'm not quite sure. Until then, I hope everyone's well and be good. Bye.